All right, so a little bit of a different schedule here. A Believe in Chargers live on a Wednesday evening as we get ready for the final preseason game of the season and roster cuts to be happening this weekend. Thanks everybody for coming in again. Believe in Chargers is a partnership here with a whole bunch of people, and we certainly appreciate our friends over at FanDuel. Be sure to check that out. A lot happening over there as the season is upon us. Our third and final preseason game. Chargers with two preseason home games last week against 49ers, again at SoFi, sort of a road game for the Rams. We'll do the road game at SoFi against the Rams in the regular season, week 7. So I think very similar to what we saw in week 2 of the preseason is what we're going to see in week 3 of the preseason, and that is just a lot of sort of straightforward vanilla. I brought this up before. I saw a lot more motions, a lot more play design, a lot more blitzes from the defense in the joint practice because it wasn't on film for all 31 other teams to see. So I think you'll probably get a lot of that. Not to mention for the Rams, I know that they are not playing a whole lot of their regulars, not only starters, but pretty much anyone that's going to be active on the 53-man roster when they kick their season off in Australia. So kind of the focus of this is going to be sort of what are we looking for? You know, what's coming? What is Thursday night going to look like? What is the conversation Friday, Saturday, and Sunday going to look like? And I think when you're trying to put together a 53-man roster, sort of the thing to remember is you've got your inactives every single week. So which 5 guys are likely going to be active almost every single game? Which players are going to contribute in special teams, and that's why maybe you're not thinking about them making the 53-man, but they are core 4 special teamers. And I think I'll just start right there. Guys like Kendall Williamson. You know, you may not think about that potential 6th safety if you include Derwin as a safety versus a corner, depending on how you want to categorize him. Kendall Williamson's going to make this team. He is an elite special teams player, and I think someone who has shown so far in the preseason and in practice that he can be a rotation player at the safety position. He's incredibly smart. He's incredibly versatile. And at the very least, he's probably one of, I would say, the 3 most important players to Coach Ficken's special teams unit. Number 1 would probably be Del'Shawn Phillips. Number 2 would be either Kendall or, well, I guess you probably got 4, right? Number 2 would be Dean Leonard, your lead gunner. And then you've got Marlowe Wax and you've got Kendall Williamson. I think that would be the 4 core 4 special teams players that Ficken would go into that 53-man roster conversation and say, hey, I got to have these guys. I think that brings up probably the most interesting name, and that's what do you do with Darius Davis? Did you see, and he only had 1 punt return in the preseason thus far, and it was a fair catch. In practice, we've seen them rotating in Ladd McConkey. We've seen them rotating in Brennan Thompson, Keandre Lambert-Smith, little bit of Keaton Mitchell in terms of kick returns. It's been Keaton Mitchell out there, and I think you could put Kimani Vidal out there as well. Just have the 2 running backs. That's a possibility. So I think it really comes down to kind of Keandre Lambert-Smith versus Darius Davis. And when you're talking about Brennan Thompson and Double D, you're talking about a wide receiver that's built very similarly, that are smaller with exceptional speed. And that's sort of what I think they can fall into that same category. And so it's a kind of just to get this whole thing rolling. The 53-man, I've got 54 right now. I could not figure out, and I hate doing it because obviously I want all 90 guys to make it. I love Terry Webb, man. I hope that nobody claims him, that he clears waivers. I think he will, and I think he'll be part of that opportunity squad. But that's like I think he's someone that you'd be certainly interested in. Defensive linemen are not easy to keep. I do have T.Y. Edwards on the roster. I think that is someone who would get claimed, and I think that's what goes into the conversation of who makes it and who doesn't. If we try to put this guy through waivers, how likely is it that we're going to be able to keep him? And if we go into game day, how likely is it that he's going to be one of the 5 that's just constantly inactive, or could he work his way into that rotation with a Boygby, Barrett, Caldwell, Tomlinson, and Tart? And I think he has a legitimate chance to do that. You know, Barrett's a 5th-round pick that's going to get some development. much like we've seen each of the last 2 years with Kennard his first year, Boygby his first year, Kennard last year, and the hope that they take that step. Right now, I don't have Kennard on there. Right now, sort of my bold, here are my 4 names in bold that I have is maybe potentially not being on the roster. That one of these right now, because I've got 54, would have to be removed from my list, and that is Logan Taylor, who's an incredibly versatile offensive lineman, can play both tackle and guard. 50 starts in college, captain of his football team. Just sort of someone that has all the makeup of an offensive lineman. We know how tough it is to find offensive line, so I don't think he would pass through waivers. I think Harkey can make it through because he's a little bit more of the measurables project. Could get claimed, but I just don't see him on an active roster right now. I could see Logan Taylor getting claimed and being on an active roster. Andre Carter, who's already been on an active roster, and I think he's had an incredible preseason. I think he's been better than – I think Dame's been solid at that edge position. I don't know why PFF has got his grade so low, but I do think Carter, because of his special teams – and what he would add there, sort of in that Thule place, that defensive lineman place with a Boygby, and what Ryan Ficken likes to use, you kind of give him, pardon the pun, the edge there. I mentioned Tara Edwards. And then finally is Avery Smith. I think that final corner spot sort of comes down to Nico Reed versus Avery Smith. And those are the 4 that I have in bold. And so when I go through it, I'll just kind of put it out there, and you guys can weigh in the comments if you want. And that is 2 quarterbacks, Justin Herbert, Trey Lance. I have 5 wide receivers, not 6. And obviously, I think those are not hard to tell. Quentin Ladd, Trey Harris, Brennan Thompson, and Keandre Lambert-Smith. I just think with Lambert-Smith, you're talking about 6'1", 6'2", almost 200 pounds, just a much different build than having Darius Davis over him and Brennan Thompson on the same team. I have 10 O-linemen. I just think it's such a position of attrition, and after what they went through last year, so I have obviously what I think is going to be the starting 5: Slater, Ashika, Slaughter, Cole Strange, Joe Alt. There's your starting 5, and then right behind him, I have your 2 tackles: Trey Pipkins, Travis Burke. I've got Branson Taylor, who I think has shown could very well be in the running by the end of the year to be one of your starting guards. That he has developed that much, and I think the coaches like him that much. And I got Spomer on there. You're going to need a backup center, and I think Spomer's played really well. So I have him on there as well. So those are the 10, and I said Logan Taylor, I think, is the one that you would kind of put in bold. Is, do you think you can get him to clear waivers? The 3 running backs are obvious: Keaton Mitchell, Kamani Vidal, Amari Hampton. And then I put Alec Ingold in the tight end category, which I think is also pretty much settled, and that's Charlie Kohler, David Njoku, Oronde Gadsden. I think Scott Matlock would clear waivers. I know they love him. They love his effort. They love the versatility and what he's done, and as he's trying to work his way to being a versatile offensive piece. And I'd be very surprised if anyone claimed him. I think it'd be 1 team, maybe 2, that could claim him, and that would be obviously the Giants and the Ravens. Jesse Minter and John Harbaugh might be interested in a fullback that's built like that. On defense, as I mentioned, the edge, it's the obvious 4. Bud Dupree's going to make the team, along with, obviously, Thule, Khalil Mack, and Akeem Mesidor. And then I do have Carter on there. And I if I'm going to rank those 4, I think Carter is potentially going to be a little bit higher than the others. I just think that special teams versatility, and look, a lot of that I think is going to come down to this game against the Rams. And if he flashes, again, I have the 6 defensive linemen: Tier Tart, Dalvin Tomlinson, Jamari Caldwell, Nick Barrett, Justin Aboigbe, and I do have Tara Edwards. Edwards is interesting just because it's such a good group, those 5. I think those 5 are going to rotate regularly. So you do have depth. You do have really good play at that position already. Do you really need a 6th? And to me, it's just positional value. It's the fact that I feel like that is D-line and O-line are behind quarterback, the premium positions where teams are looking to build depth and could easily put, one of the, they could put Edwards on their roster, and you could see him working into another team's defensive line rotation that maybe isn't as deep as the Chargers. And I think they did a heck of a job developing him last year. I think that's probably a big Mike Elston trophy project. Like, hey, let's not get rid of this guy when we just kind of worked him and got him to this point, and we think he can be a very viable. Watching his film, he's great. He leads the team in pressures, and granted, he's got a lot more snaps. So to me, I think he's certainly worth keeping on the roster. Then you have your linebackers. I got 5. I don't have Junior right now. I don't know how to fit him in unless the Troy Dye conversation happens. And then when you get into that, you're talking about money. And right now you got Troy at $3.4 million, and he has still got so this is his last year at 3.4. Dead cap would be 1.2. His signing roster base, so it's all in. They're already in for 3.4, and Junior as a third round pick is in for 1.6, and then he's got his 4th year. So I think it's a question of, to me, and when I look at it, Troy Dye is out there on the second line with Del'Shawn Phillips, who I told you, who I had mentioned is a core special teamer. So he's on there. Marlowe Wax is a no-brainer. I can see Marlowe Wax being the third linebacker. He's been the best player in the preseason, and it has not been close. So to me, I think surprisingly that could be where a conversation. And Troy Dye is a good special teamer as well, but do they want to try to continue to develop Junior? He's going to get claimed. There's no question he's going to get claimed. He's not going to clear waivers and make the opportunity squad. He's going to end up on the Ravens. He's going to end up on the Seahawks. One of those, whether it's Mike McDonald or it's Jesse Minter, one of those guys that coached him at Michigan, know how talented he is, and maybe he just needs they certainly would take a flyer on someone that's that talented and has that physical makeup. So right now I don't have him, but I think that could be a surprising conversation. I don't think they're carrying 6. I've got 5 corners. Hart, Still, Dante Jackson, Dean Leonard, your gunner. And then I have Avery Smith over Nico Reed right now. I think it's kind of one of those where I feel like he's just shown a little bit more in the preseason. Eric Rodgers did not play against the 49ers. Thought he played okay against the Texans. So I have Avery Smith in that slot. Right now, corners also, because of their special teams. Typically, your special teams, core fours, got a lot of corners in there. So that's someone who could get picked up, but he could also pass through waivers. I could see that. But so that would be potentially, maybe if I'm looking at which one, that might be the one that you would remove. And then you put Derwin in that, corner, because he's probably more of a big nickel than anything else. So you would have 5 corners, 5 safeties. And then your safeties are, obviously I have 6. So let's just put Derwin in there and maybe pull Smith off to make my 53. And then you have Elijah Molden, R.J. Mickens, Genesis Smith, Tony Jefferson, and Kendall Williamson as your safeties. And that's how you get to your 53. Some players, like I said, that would be worth looking at. Trevor Penning. I think prior to Sunday at 3:00, that Joe Ortiz is probably going to field some phone calls before they try to get someone to clear waivers. I do think I think someone could trade for Trevor. I think just the first round pedigree, the flexibility, the 6-0 line, for people that are playing a lot bigger right now with these 13 personnel, with the extra, the jumbo personnel, the extra linemen. I do think Penning does have some value. I don't know if you could replace your, it's a tough question. Could you replace your 6th round pick on Logan Taylor with a 6th? That would be an interesting question if you could pull that off, and just try to try not to lose that draft capital and get a future. Maybe you could swap out a 7 for a 6 or something like that. Just find some value there. So I think Penning's an interesting one that I don't have on there. I already mentioned Junior. I mentioned the corners, Eric Rodgers and Nico Reed, who both made it last year. I think Rodney Shelley is in the conversation. And then at edge, Kyle Kennard, a 4th round pick a year ago, the former SEC Defensive Player of the Year, that just, to me, hasn't quite flashed as much as Carter has. And I think Dame, I just think you can probably get him to push through. I think Kennard to get picked up because of the reputation and the pedigree. I think there's a possibility that he clears as well, just because he hasn't really shown a whole lot from his rookie campaign to what we've seen in the preseason. So there's a possibility he could make that opportunity squad. And then I think the question with Dame is he's 26. He had, he flashed for 1 year at Western Michigan and hasn't really shown a lot in the preseason. I think he's had a couple. I shouldn't say that. I think Dame's had some really good moments where you've seen that power. and just that bull rush and what he's capable of doing. And so I do think that's a tough question. I do think that's a tough conversation, especially with Chris O'Leary. So that's 53. Let me see if I got anything on here from you guys on the 53. It's Martin. Thanks so much for saying hello. Junior, there you go. So CJ, I do think he would be picked up by Jesse or Coach Mack up in Seattle. I would be very surprised. But remember now, they can't just pick him up and put him on their practice squad. They got to come on the active roster. So they've got to have a roster slot of their own in order to pick him up and put him on the team. First live for Steve Rogers. There we go, Steve. Appreciate you. Saw you at Chargers-Patriots playoff game in New England. This is my man, the dog. Cool enough to come over and dap me up. Thanks for the content. Appreciate you. Yeah, anytime you see me out there, including SoFi against the Rams for the preseason, just holler. Love chatting with all you guys, especially if we're on the road and get to see Charger fans. It's always fun to have friendly faces there. Mega Wingman, love to have you at my side if we're out. Time the league bumps the 53 to the 58. Yeah, I mean, that's, now you're talking about salaries and additional cash and stuff. And I think the other thing, too, is, 53, like, it's not hard to have inactives. Like, 48's plenty of guys to have active, and so I think that's what's important to keep in mind, right? Like, how many of these guys are going to play? I think Nico ended up getting into the back half of one game because of injury, ultimately, is what he played in 2026. And we were making such a big deal about, man, if you put this guy, if you try to squeak him through to the practice squad, he's going to get claimed. And, and he barely played. And that's kind of what you want on the back end. It's almost like in case of emergency, break glass. Offensive line, I think, is a little bit different because of what they went through last year. Like, look at Joe Alt, right? The guy played 6 games and he made the Pro Bowl. That's how good he is. And you look at what the Chargers' record was with him out there versus with him not out there, and that's why he's one of the favorites to win Personal Protector from our friends at FanDuel, because that's just how valuable he is. And obviously the positional flexibility from right to left tackle, and he can do it like it's nothing and flip sides. See it here. I mean, he's what, 5th or tied for 4th, in line, tied for 4th. So Penei Sewell, the overwhelming favorite, Wirfs right behind him. But to me, I think Joe's low. I get that Creed Humphrey has got the reputation as the best center in football. Garrett Bowles probably anchors arguably one of the better lines. I just don't think he's anywhere near as good of a protector as Joe Alt. I think he's in that Penei Sewell, Tristan Wirfs conversation. To me, that's where he belongs. He's legitimately, if you were asking NFL teams to draft offensive linemen, I'd be really surprised if he wasn't the first pick. I'm not taking anything away from Sewell. I think he is certainly close to being the best offensive lineman in the league. Same with Tristan Wirfs. But I just think, based on how young he is, how good he is right now at that age, that's probably where most people would go with the number 1 pick. And I think that's what makes it so interesting when we think about the conversation that we had around the draft, when it was going to be Malik Neighbors or Joe Alt, and how disappointed people were when it was Joe, and now we recognize how important that is. And so I say all of that as we're talking about this 53 man to say, yeah, when we had Mike McDaniel in a presser, he said, I think the number is 10. And then from there, you decide if you want 9 or if you want 11. He's like, but if you tell me where do we usually start at 10. And then we figure out if we can carry one light or if we got to carry one heavy. So to me, I'm comfortable keeping that number at 10 and keeping Logan Taylor on the roster. Jason from Connecticut, met you in New York. Finally made a live believe. Thank you, Jason. Should we be worried about Rashawn Slater? I'd be a lot more worried if he wasn't back at practice this week. And I bumped into him. I hate doing though. It's not like I'm like name dropping to him, but I bumped into him and he seems fine. We were chatting a little bit. He's a gentleman. I was running late. My commute up to the Bolt for Coach Harbaugh's presser and my subsequent sit down with him took an hour and a half when it was supposed to take an hour because traffic was terrible, and had to hit the head before I and it was like 9. It was like 8:59. Coach is typically very punctual, so the presser started at 9, and we were both trying to hop into the loo, and he was like, "You look like you're in a hurry. You better go ahead of me." So what a gentleman, right? Let me do that. And then we just kind of chatted for a quick second because I could see the coach wasn't in there, and he seemed to be in good spirits. And the fact that he's back out there, and I believe Rashawn, and I don't think they would have put him on the podium if they thought that he wasn't tracking to be ready to go, or if he wasn't in a good place. And when he hit the lectern, he told us, "This is making sure I'm ready for September 13th and just taking every precaution." So I think you got to be a little worried, but I'd say my panic level has dropped dramatically. So yeah, there you go, Jason. Someone who could be a surprise cut candidate, Danny. Yeah, I think I think it's Junior, right? I think that would be the most surprising. We thought he was going to start next to Dan Henley his rookie year, and we were like, this is going to be um, the linebacking unit for the next 10 years on this team, and they're going to have the best linebackers in football. And we are all very surprised that it hasn't turned out that way, and that's injuries. The appendectomy, the foot. He has had some good flashes. So to me, that's sort of, I think, the surprising one. I was hoping, and look, he may have a monster game. Had the pick 6 against the 49ers. I think he's played well in the preseason, and if he has a monster game against the Rams, then maybe that's, like I said, I think that's something that could be sort of thought about. When I look at that linebacker room, though, my no doubters are Henley, Perriman, Wax, Delshon, and I think maybe a conversation could happen. Colson, Bud goes. Keep Dame. Yeah, I think, but I thought Bud looked really good. I know it was very limited snaps. I don't remember what his snaps were. There weren't a lot. But I thought he looked good. I thought he rushed the passer well. I thought he set the edge well. He had a nice chase on Brock Purdy where he ran him out of bounds before he could pick up the first down. So I thought Bud looked good, and I think it's clear they're giving him, days off at rest days. Got the first preseason game off, played the same number of snaps as the starters as Thule in that second game. So he's making the team. Surprise cut is Vidal. That's interesting. I do think it's clear that Keaton is RB2. And then I think you have the conversation of, do you think that Amar Johnson and, makes more sense than Kimani? I think it's important to remember, that, how good Kimani was. And I think, remember, like, these guys are learning a whole new system, like this wide zone, this outside zone that they're running requires them to kind of, see the field a little bit differently. And I think everybody is still trying to get fully up to speed. To me, that's the number one thing you want to look at in the preseason is, can we get this running game going? Because it just has, I think they are, I've got it written down here. They are, the offense, the running backs are averaging, where did it go? I know I had it. Is it right here? Yeah, here we go. 46 carries for 108 yards. That is 2.5 yards per carry with a long of 9. That's certainly got to get sorted. We get nothing for Colson and the Ravens swipe him up, go to the Super Bowl. I mean, I think here, so Fred, that's an interesting thing, right? And so that's sort of what I always point out to people is you can't be too caught up in what the player could become. I get it. I like that you put the qualifier in there that you would like to see them acquire an asset for him before they cut him. Can you call the Seahawks? Can you call the Giants? Can you call the Ravens? Could you make some calls and say, hey, would you like to give us a day 3 pick for Junior? I think they could do that. Certainly, that's a good way to qualify it. But I think the idea of trying to replace a day 2 pick, not going to happen, or a high day 3 pick, I think they can recognize what the Chargers are staring at. Look, I hope he just balls out and they feel like, okay, flips, the switch flipped, let's roll. Late in the chat, did you discuss? I did, Tony. I did talk about Brennan and Double D, and I think that it's just more realistic that Keandre Lambert-Smith makes this team over Darius. But I do think Ficken is going to make a case for Darius. that he is important as a punt returner, gives us a first down on every punt return, that his speed is back. So I do think that case will be made. We may get rear-ended. That's right, our man Lo Neal. And he'll be back next week. Just kind of I had some issues with our normal slot, and then the Low had some issues with the late slot here, so that's why we're kind of putting this together. On a serious note, do I foresee any more significant roster acquisitions? You know what? I wouldn't be surprised, Sag the Archer, because he's done it, right? We've seen him do it with Tier, with Elijah Molden. Joe is always looking to get the best 53. And I think that's one of his great qualities is a lot of times general managers and front offices get enamored with their guys and maybe they overvalue their guys. And I feel like Joe is always scouring to see if, do we have this player that's on the back end of their roster rated higher than this guy on the back end of our roster? And I think that would be an upgrade. So let's go out and get this done, So that's sort of, I think, one of his great strengths is that he doesn't get too emotional and doesn't get too attached to his own guys. Any possibility of a team trading for Colson or Kennard? I think Colson would make more sense. I just don't think we've seen enough out of Kennard that you would get someone. I think because like if you're going to trade for the guy, you expect him to be active on game day and to make an impact, or to potentially make the 53, and you think he's got a legitimate chance to break into the rotation and not just be someone that you're going to keep around. Now look, the nice thing is you do have 2 years left on the deal. So maybe that does make sense, that they would give up an asset to, just kind of keep him. And maybe he's one of the 5 inactives until you can kind of really figure something out. And then next year, the idea is that you've got him on that rookie year deal on a 4th year to really get a look on a low number. Let's see. Worried about Keaton Mitchell a little bit. Keaton and Brennan, just because speed guys. I think when you see that, that's their asset, is speed. And when you have lower body injuries, then speed becomes an issue. What up, Money? Love what you do. Son is 16 years old, loves the Chargers, wants to be a GM. Any tips on what road to take after high school? Yeah, I think you're, just getting involved when you go to college with the football team. And I think you're now NFL Pro. You can subscribe to that. You can watch a ton of film. I think you subscribe to so many of those YouTube channels and watching how the YouTube scouts and former scouts break down, videos like our Daniel Jeremiah, who's the best in the business at it, who was a longtime scout for the Ravens, Eagles, and Browns. And I think you watch the way that they watch football and see if you can help, if you can replicate that yourself. And then I think you get involved any way possible with the football team and, see if you can work on scouting. So that's what I would do if I were him. And look, scout high school. High school's on Huddle now, right? So get the Huddle film and try to scout and see if you can, recognize the game from a scout's eye and what jumps out to you and start putting together stuff and see if you can work with the high school football team. There you go. A lot of Colson trade. Davis, we talked about a couple times. Branson Taylor, IR, 4 weeks. Keep Logan, doesn't get nabbed. Hopefully, we'll see how that goes. It's possible. That is possible. But yeah, I think eventually O-lineman. I mean, think about the Dodgers, the Chargers. Think about the Chargers last year and how many guys they went through, and Austin Deculus and all of these guys they picked up. I think that's sort of, you just know that O-linemen are a commodity, and that if you've got someone that teams think can provide depth and make your active roster and be one of your 9, they're going to come get them. E-Dub, appreciate you, brother. Yeah, my guy E-Dub fired me twice, I think. No, E-Dub only fired me once and then rehired me. I used to do these. I used to do voiceovers for the NFL Network called NFL Replay, and then I would do voiceovers for NFL Films, which for all of their top 10 lists. And then they got rid of Replay and thereby got rid of me, but then they brought me back when they launched NFL Fantasy Live. So that was fun, and then I got fired a second time by someone I barely knew. And they replaced me with some other people. What's going on with Thule? Don't know, David. Not sure. I think that's something that'll get sorted out. I think the ask was probably incredibly high, and why not? Right? He's a heck of a player. He's only 24 years old. Understandable why. I think he's 24, right? Did he turn 24 yet? I feel like he turned 24. Where's your birth date? No, he will be. Gosh, it is nuts. Like that is nuts that Tuli is still 23. He will be 24 on the 3rd of September. It's crazy. It truly is crazy that he is this good and he is this young, and he's going to get a second bite at the apple at like 27, and get a chance to cash in even more as he should. But I think they'll get that sorted. I do think they'll get that number into the, you know, 30. I think the number will start with a 3. And I think as long as his representation doesn't want the TJ Watt, Max Crosby, Nick Bosa, 35, 36, 38 number, that they'll be fine and they'll get it squared away. What's my opinion on the Chargers not paying for IOL? Yeah, I thought there were some players out there, Tony, that they could go get. They did pay for IOL. They signed Tyler Biadasz to a 3-year, $30 million deal. So they went out and that was priority number one. And I thought it was one of the best signings of one of the best signings of the offseason. So unfortunately, he got hurt. But I think this line with Biadasz at center and Slaughter, who really was starting to come along at left guard, was going to be pretty good. Going to be pretty darn good. And unfortunately, the injury now has pushed Jake. And I think ultimately Jake's going to be fine. I think this is better for him. I think just have him play the position that he's comfortable with. And I think by week 6, week 8, you're going to see a guy who's playing very high level center. And so to me, I look at it as all the incoming that Joe Ortiz took, right, for taking Slaughter instead of taking Pregnon at guard. And I say, man, they certainly worked out for him. But yeah, I would have liked Elton Jenkins. I thought he's athletic enough to fit this scheme and durable enough and had positional flexibility. Like he's, could have played center as well. So yeah, I think that's one. But from my understanding is they offered Elton a contract. They offered Zion a contract. They were both very, very similar numbers. And those guys, for whatever reason, chose to go to Cleveland. So I think they were out there and just didn't come together. But yeah, I wish there was a little more depth there. And I think if you're like me and the number one the number one off-season signing was Mike McDaniel, this is how they operate, man. I mean, look at Kyle Shanahan and what he's had at center. Look at kind of Sean McVay and what they've had on interior offensive line and the fact that I don't know. I feel like LaFleur, right? They let Elton Jenkins walk like this for whatever reason, and look what Mike McDaniel had in Miami, right? And what Aaron Brewer turned into. And so I just think there is some sort of proof in the pudding. I wouldn't freak out about Cole Strange and his 9 snaps. Were they pretty? No, they were not. But I do think listening to Mike McDaniel talk about it and the way he sort of assessed it in saying, he was working like a vet. He was working on some things, was being a little too aggressive, got a little overextended. The one rep that everybody put on social media, like he got his feet caught up and he fell and it looked bad. But I'm a little concerned. I'm not going to lie, but at the same time, I also, believe in, kind of the way that they wanted to run it. So here we are. It's what they got, and I do think they're in a much better position than last year. And I think having Slater and all it just changes so much, man. It really does. It changes the dynamic of this so much if they can be healthy. Bummed. Oh, well, you know what? You're here, Mike. You can always go back as soon as because we're going to wrap this thing up here in a second. Trying to think if there's anything else. Super Bowl odds, because our friends at FanDuel put this stuff together. So took a hit. They were at 1,600. Now they're at 1,800 after the Biadasz injury. So you see them there below the Lions, Texans, Chiefs, Patriots. They were 5th in line at plus 1,600, just behind the Ravens there. So you know what? Get a little bit of value. And listen, I think that Slaughter is going to find a home at center. and he's going to be a lot more comfortable there. Everyone talking about Amar Johnson. Personally, think DeWosier fits this offense. Yeah, look, I just want to see a running back do something, right? Like show us a little explosion. DeWosier's got an extra gear. That one run he had against the Texans where he hit the sideline, and it's like, oh, okay, well, there's some speed now. And I think ultimately, like with the running back conversation, I think we're all going to want to see Amari and Hampton and Keaton Mitchell for 17 games. That's kind of what we're going to be looking at. Is that Amarian is a workhorse. Keaton Mitchell's going to get you, some of those 5-6 carries, some pass plays, and that's ultimately what we want to see. And that third back is there as an emergency. So, and if Amarian needs to, get a little spell in there, so that's kind of where I am with that. Here we go. I'd rather keep Kendall Williamson over Colson. No question about it, GS. Like, to me, that's like Kendall's a lock for this roster. He is an incredibly valuable special teamer. Core 4 guy. And like I said, I would love to see it, much like Marlo Wax. Like, I'd love to see Marlo Wax and Kendall get some run, get some run with the twos. So I think they can be really good players. Can I go on a random tangent, Robert, on my experience on Nathan For You? Sure, real quick. For those of you that don't know, Nathan For You is a really good show. And I randomly got a call out of nowhere. I'll never forget it because I was flying to call an Alabama game the next morning and because there were no directs to Birmingham and I was doing the radio show, my flight was at like 5 a.m. It was like a Southwest through Dallas or something like that. And they said they were filming in the dead of night, which a lot of these shows do. Like when I did $1 Million Mile, if any of you remember that, we lasted for like a half second on CBS. I did it with, interestingly enough, Tim Tebow and Maria Taylor, and both of them have gone on to great things. So maybe I was the one that brought the show down. But they reached out to me and said, hey, we would love to have you do play-by-play. We've got an idea. It's this show called The Claw of Shame. And we want a play-by-play guy. So can you do it? And the producer of the show was a fan of the radio show and of my stuff on the Lakers. So I said, yeah, sure. But I think I was calling I think it ended up being that really good Alabama. It is National Dog Day, and my dog is torturing me right now, trying to just like, if I don't pet her, she like bounces my arm to pet her. So that's what's going on here. But they said, can we get you to do play-by-play? I said, no problem. So I show up, and I got to call play-by-play of, this Claw of Shame. And I start out calling it like a basketball game, and Nathan doesn't talk to me. I can see he's not happy. And they cut, and he just walks away. And I'm like, okay, this isn't good. Producer comes over. He's like, hey, man, can you do more of a golf broadcast? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. Just kind of giving me that. They gave me nothing. I had no script. All I was doing was calling what I was watching like it was a sporting event. So I had no script. The only thing I had to do is I had to say a line like, and here Nathan is now acknowledging that he is aware of his intentions and his actions, and the judge will certify that. It was something like that. And then I got on with the golf broadcast, and I think it wasn't more than 2 takes. It might have been a 1-take Jake. I think it might have been. And then we did one for safety. And then I got the big smile and, oh, man, that was great. Thank you. And I was like, great, I got to get out of here. And I drove straight to the airport because for all of the stuff. And by the way, the kids, like, they had no idea what was going on. My green room was right next to the parents, and the parents were all talking like, yeah, I don't know what this show is. They said it's something about they needed young kids, and it's like 2 a.m. and these kids are out there. And for those of you that haven't seen it, I don't want to give too many details, but I would recommend going to check it out. Worried about the O-line. It's not going to be anywhere near what we saw last year. Alton Slater are the best tackle duo in the league, I believe. And that's just going to change everything. I think Slaughter's going to be fine at center. Slaughter was tracking to start at left guard. I would not keep him there. Look, that's an interesting one, Steve. I didn't read the rest. Plugging in Spomer. Ashika's going to be a good left guard. I think he's going to be fine. He's not quite as athletic, but he's strong. To me, he jumped out right away. And I think everybody was like, really, Ashika? And I would have these conversations with the beat writers. I'm like, yeah, dude, to me, looks like it. And I think, you've seen a little bit of Trey, a little bit of Branson, but to me, Ashika always kind of raised his hand in that spot. So I think I think Slaughter's going to be great at center. I do. I think it'll take a second, but I think eventually that's kind of what he is, man. He was most people's number one center, and an All-American and a captain of the team, and like that's just. And they drafted him because they're like, yeah, this guy is so smart. He's athletic. He can totally play guard, and we've got a backup center if we need it. And so to me, that was like he was going to be a guard, and then when Biadasz's contract ran, just move him to center, and now you got a guy with flexibility. Chargers captains predictions: Herbert, Alt, Slater, Ingold as the alternate, Mack, Henley, Derwin, Denzel as the alternate. Yeah, that's good to me. I'm with you on that one. Biggio. Thank you, Spicoli. Appreciate that very much. All I need are some tasty waves, a good buzz, and I'm fine. Harbaugh, hot seat? Absolutely not. I don't. I think they've won 11 games in back-to-back seasons with all those injuries and with having a roster reset his first year. And they've just been the product of they've been the victims of unfortunate timing. They've got all of these injuries, and the offense has let them down. When the playoffs have come around, the defense has been dominant. So to me, it's can we get Lowe into the Bolts Hall of Fame? That's a great call. I'll bring that up. We need to get him into the big Hall of Fame too. Block before we talk about running backs. Yeah, I think that, but also Daniel, I do think there are some running back issues there that there are that they are also getting acclimated to this style of offense and the way that you've got to stretch this thing out and keep stretching until you find that crease that you're supposed to pop into. And I think a lot of them are starting to get used to that now. Glad to catch you live. Appreciate you, Jew, or Jouet. Popper got a job with the NFL. Yeah, he got the national job. He got one of the national. The Athletic added a free agency position and another national NFL writer. He got that job, so I'm very excited for him. He earned it. He works his tail off, and I like Popper a lot. Respect his football opinions a lot. Anyone says you need to say anything about a job? That's highest rated center in the preseason. It's not Slaughter. No, I agree. I think Spomer's look good. I think he's earned a place on this roster. So they've got their backup center now moving forward. I think that's great. They'll have him all year. And that way, look, if think about that, right? So now you've got a backup center in Spomer. Now Jake can move back to left guard next year when Biadasz comes back. And now you're building depth on the offensive line. Good takes. Thanks for tonight. The boss saying thanks for joining tonight. I appreciate it. I'm going to take that comment as me. You're welcome, Believe. Thank you for joining tonight, all of you as well. Biadasz is a captain, but he got hurt. Agree. Bolted up. How many points will the offense average this year, in your opinion? I'm going to go 20. You know what? Let's make it an educated guess, right? Let's go NFL stats, and let's go team stats. We'll wrap with this. Offense, team stats. So, number one offense per, let's see, 30, 28, 28, 28. To get into the top 10, is that 10th? 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah, so 25 gets you into the top 10. I'm going to go 25.5, and they make the top 10. That's what I'm going to go. Which tight end scores the most TDs for us this year? I think it's going to be Njoku. I think he's going to be a big red zone target. I don't know if he'll be the highest fantasy point total tight end, but I do think that he will have the most touchdowns. Let's see. Okay, let's get out on a negative. Listening to me, trying to optimize an O-line that is not what we thought it would be. Third-year Harbaugh O-line after the speech about O-line dependency and all. But wow. Yeah, look, I think they, that they made good on drafting Joe Alt at 5 instead of Malik Neighbors. I think they made good on finding what I think is a top 10 center in the league in Tyler Biadasz. That they trusted Butch Berry and Mike McDaniel, who were super impressed with Cole Strange last year in Miami. And they drafted a guy that they would have taken with their original second-round pick if they weren't able to trade back, and Jake Slaughter, with the intention of moving him to left guard. And that is what they visualized the offensive line looking like. So I think the intention was there. And Could they have signed Ciamalo, Jenkins, any of those? Yeah. And I would have loved to see it. But I mean, like, remember how, like, just think about the belly aching for Wyatt Teller. Why aren't we signing Wyatt Teller? Why aren't we signing Wyatt? Wyatt Teller's not going to start. Wyatt Teller's has really struggled in the preseason. So I think it's, a lot of it is also sort of predicated on, you don't really know how these guys are going to fit. You don't know how some of these older old linemen, are how healthy they're going to be. Oh my gosh, just look at the center attrition this preseason. It's crazy. I saw Pinter. So what? The Lions, the Ravens, and the Chargers all went out and signed free agent centers, and all three of them are out for the year. Like, it's wild, man. All right. So there we go. Appreciate you. And we'll do it again next week. And hopefully let's see some inspired play, some crisp play is what the coaches said they wanted to see. Some execution, better execution. And then we'll, give these guys the best opportunity to make the 53-man roster. Thank you, everybody, for coming in. Thanks to Believe and FanDuel. And be sure to, share it. Let people know, comment, all that fun stuff. I like to dig into the comments afterwards. This was a lot of stream of consciousness. So appreciate all of you for sticking around and listen to an old man ramble as the sun has gone down and the spotlight has made me totally white when I feel like I got some pretty good color. All right, everybody, have a great night and bolt up.